In the prestigious halls of Whitmore Institute, a brilliant clinical psychologist was about to face her worst nightmare. What started as a dream job took a shocking turn when she came face to face with systematic professional sabotage. Dr. Elena Vasquez wasn't your typical researcher. For 5 years, she had mastered trauma psychology, known for her methodical brilliance. When her supervisor spread rumors about her mental instability, she had no idea she was walking into psychological warfare. Elena's decision to weaponize her own expertise would lead to a predator's complete destruction. What began as mentorship would become deadly psychological chess. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The September morning felt crisp with possibility as Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped through the gleaming glass doors of the Whitmore Institute for Mental Health Research. Her heels clicked against the polished marble floor, each step echoing with the weight of years spent dreaming of this moment. The lobby stretched before her like a cathedral of academia. Soaring ceilings, modern art installations, and the quiet hum of important work being done behind closed doors. Elena paused to adjust her navy blazer, her fingers instinctively smoothing the fabric as she absorbed the magnitude of where she stood. 5 years of doctoral work, countless nights hunched over research papers, surviving on coffee and determination, it had all led to this. The Whitmore Institute, the most prestigious mental health research facility on the East Coast, where breakthrough studies had redefined trauma therapy and where careers were made. Dr. Vasquez? A warm voice interrupted her reverent observation. Elena turned to see a woman approaching with an easy smile and an extended hand. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. Welcome to Whitmore." "Elena, please." She shook Sarah's hand, noting the firm grip and the genuine warmth in her eyes. Sarah was perhaps 35, with an air of competence that spoke of someone who'd navigated these halls successfully. "I can't believe I'm actually here. Trust me, I remember that feeling." Sarah's laugh carried a note Elena couldn't quite identify, nostalgia mixed with something else. "Come on, let me show you around before you meet with Dr. Hartwell." As they walked through the corridors, Elena marveled at the state-of-the-art facilities. Research labs with equipment she'd only dreamed of using, conference rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river, and everywhere, the sense that important work was being done behind closed doors. "That's Dr. Hartwell's office," Sarah said as they passed an imposing wooden door at the end of the main corridor. The nameplate gleamed, Dr. Marcus Hartwell, Senior Research Director. "You'll like him. He's very invested in his researchers' success." Something in Sarah's tone made Elena glance at her, but Sarah was already moving on, pointing out the library and the graduate student workspace. Elena filed the moment away, chalking it up to the natural politics of any workplace. Their tour concluded in the break room, where several researchers sat around a table discussing an upcoming conference. The conversation paused as Sarah and Elena entered, and Elena found herself the focus of curious but friendly attention. "Everyone, this is Dr. Elena Vasquez, our new trauma recovery specialist," Sarah announced. "Elena, meet the team." The introductions were warm, peppered with questions about her dissertation and her research interests. Elena felt herself relaxing into the familiar rhythm of academic discussion. These were her people. Researchers who understood the passion for discovery, the drive to heal, the belief that their work could make a difference. Your work on childhood resilience factors was groundbreaking. That longitudinal study you conducted, we've cited it several times in our own work here. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Thank you. That means everything coming from someone of your caliber." The conversation was interrupted by a tall man with silver-touched brown hair and a commanding presence. Dr. Marcus Hartwell entered the break room with the kind of confidence that seemed to shift the very atmosphere. Conversations quieted, and Elena noticed how the other researchers' postures subtly changed, becoming more formal, more careful. Dr. Vasquez, I presume. Marcus extended his hand with a smile that could have graced a magazine cover. Marcus Hartwell, I've been looking forward to meeting you since I read your application. His handshake was firm, lasting just a moment longer than necessary. Elena found herself immediately struck by his charisma, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, the warmth in his voice, the sense that she had his complete attention. Dr. Hartwell, it's an honor. Thank you for this opportunity. Please, call me Marcus. We're very collaborative here. He gestured around the room. I trust Sarah has been showing you what we've built here? It's incredible. The resources, the research potential. But you haven't seen anything yet. Marcus's smile widened. Why don't we head to my office? I'm eager to discuss your research proposal in detail. As they walked toward his office, Elena caught a glimpse of Sarah's expression, a tightness around her eyes that didn't match her encouraging nod. But Marcus was speaking, his attention fully focused on Elena, and she found herself drawn into his orbit. His office was impressive. Bookcases lined with prestigious journals, awards and degrees covering one wall, a massive window overlooking the river. Marcus gestured for Elena to take a seat in one of the leather chairs facing his desk. Your dissertation on trauma-informed therapeutic interventions, Marcus began, settling into his chair, was exceptional. The way you synthesized attachment theory with neurobiological research, brilliant. Elena felt a flutter of validation. To hear her work praised by someone of Marcus's stature was intoxicating. I believe your research could be the foundation for revolutionary changes in how we approach childhood trauma recovery, Marcus continued. With the right support, the right resources, you could produce work that transforms the field. That's my dream, Elena said, leaning forward slightly. I want to help children who've experienced She caught herself, not ready to share personal details. Marcus's eyes sharpened with what appeared to be understanding. Personal experience often drives the best research. Your proposal for the multi-phase intervention study, I'd like to see it expanded. Bigger sample size, longer follow-up period. With Whitmore's resources and my guidance, we could create something truly groundbreaking. The next hour passed in a whirlwind of enthusiastic planning. Marcus spoke about funding opportunities, research partnerships, publication strategies. Elena felt herself being swept up in his vision, a vision where her work could reach thousands of children, where her research could establish new standards of care. I should warn you, Marcus said as their meeting concluded, there will be challenges. Not everyone here immediately embraces new ideas. Some of the senior researchers can be territorial about their areas of expertise. Elena nodded, understanding the academic landscape. I'm prepared for that. I just want to do good work. That's what I admire about you, Elena, that passion, that drive. It reminds me of myself at your age. Marcus stood, walking around his desk to escort her to the door. I have a feeling we're going to accomplish great things together. As Elena left Marcus's office, she felt almost lightheaded with possibility. Everything she'd worked for, everything she'd dreamed of, seemed within reach. The Whitmore Institute wasn't just offering her a job. It was offering her a chance to fulfill her deepest professional aspirations under the mentorship of one of the field's most respected figures. Walking back through the corridors, she noticed things she'd missed on her first tour. The way conversations seemed to pause when she passed certain offices. The quick glances exchanged between researchers when Marcus's name came up in casual conversation. The subtle tension that seemed to underlie the polished professional atmosphere. But Elena was too buoyed by hope and excitement to pay these observations much attention. She was finally where she belonged, with work that mattered and a mentor who believed in her potential. The nagging voice in the back of her mind, the one that had learned to be wary through years of struggling against skepticism and bias, was drowned out by the intoxicating rush of acceptance and possibility. Standing once again in the marble lobby, Elena looked back at the elevator that would take her to her new office, to her new life. The future stretched before her, bright with promise. She had no way of knowing that within these very walls, behind the facade of academic excellence and collegial support, a predator was already sizing up his newest prey. The golden opportunity she'd dreamed of was about to become her worst nightmare. But for now, in this moment of triumph, Elena Vasquez believed she had finally found her professional home. Marcus's hand lingered on the doorframe as Elena gathered her things from their second meeting. The golden opportunity she'd felt so certain about just days before now carried the weight of subtle unease. Elena, Marcus's voice held a note of concern she hadn't heard before. I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've noticed you seem quite intense about your research. That's admirable, of course, but sometimes passion can cloud judgment. Elena paused, her laptop halfway into her bag. I'm sorry? Nothing to apologize for. It's just, Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. Your emotional investment in the trauma work. I understand it comes from a personal place, but we need to ensure objectivity isn't compromised. The words hit like ice water. Elena had spent years proving her academic rigor, her ability to separate personal experience from professional analysis. My methodology is sound. The preliminary data. Of course it is. You're brilliant. Marcus's smile was reassuring, but something in his eyes remained calculating. I'm simply looking out for your best interests. Sometimes fresh PhDs can be overeager. It's my job to guide that enthusiasm productively. Elena left his office with confusion gnawing at her chest. She'd presented clear, methodical research plans. Where had he seen emotional compromise? The confusion deepened during the next team meeting. Elena was midway through explaining her intervention protocols when Marcus interrupted. Forgive me, Elena, but I'm concerned about the sample selection criteria. Are we perhaps being too narrow? Too focused on specific trauma presentations? Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks. The criteria ensure consistency across variables. Standard protocol for... Yes, but standard isn't necessarily innovative. Marcus's smile never wavered. Perhaps we need broader parameters, more flexibility in our approach. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Dr. Walsh nodded thoughtfully. Marcus has a point about broader applicability. Elena watched as her carefully constructed methodology was dismantled under the guise of constructive feedback. Each suggestion felt like a small death, her research vision morphing into something unrecognizable. After the meeting, Sarah caught Elena's elbow in the hallway. Coffee? Sarah's voice was carefully neutral, but her eyes held something Elena was beginning to recognize as wariness. They sat in the corner of the Institute's cafe, steam rising from their cups like a barrier between them and the other researchers scattered throughout the space. How are you settling in? Sarah asked, but her fingers drummed against her cup. Fine. Learning the ropes. Elena studied Sarah's face. Marcus is very involved in shaping the research direction. Sarah's drumming stopped. A long moment passed before she spoke. Elena, can I ask you something off the record? Of course. How important is this position to you? I mean, career-wise. The question caught Elena off guard. It's everything. This research, it's what I've worked toward my entire academic life. Sarah nodded slowly, something like sadness crossing her features. That's what I figured. Sarah took a sip of coffee, then seemed to make a decision. Marcus is brilliant. His research contributions are undeniable, but be careful about your boundaries, professional ones. Make sure you document everything. Keep copies of your work, your proposals, your correspondence. Elena frowned. Is there something specific I should know? Sarah's eyes darted around the cafe before returning to Elena's face. Just Be careful. Trust your instincts. That evening, Elena stayed late to review her grant proposal one final time before submission. The document she pulled up on her computer made her stomach drop. Her name appeared only as research associate rather than principal investigator. Key sections of her methodology, the innovative parts that made the study unique, had been edited, not improved, changed. The theoretical framework she'd spent months developing was attributed to collaborative development under senior supervision. Elena stared at the screen, her hands trembling slightly. This wasn't mentorship. This wasn't guidance. This was theft. She found Marcus in his office, door open, grading papers under the warm glow of his desk lamp. "Marcus, I need to discuss the grant proposal." He looked up with that same warm smile. "Of course. Come in. Close the door." Elena remained standing. "My name has been changed to research associate. The methodology section credits collaborative development rather than my individual work." "Elena." Marcus set down his pen, his expression becoming paternal. "This is exactly what I was concerned about. That emotional investment is affecting your perspective." "My perspective on my own work being attributed to someone else?" "Your work?" Marcus's eyebrows rose. "Elena, you're a first-year researcher. This project exists within the framework of established institute protocols. Your contributions are valuable, certainly, but the overall design, the theoretical approach, that's institutional knowledge." Elena felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "I developed that framework in my dissertation. It's my original research. Adapted to our institutional standards, refined through my guidance." Marcus stood, moving around his desk. "I'm not trying to diminish your contributions, but academic collaboration requires learning to work within systems, not fighting them." As Elena walked to her car that night, Sarah's words echoed in her mind. "Trust your instincts." Her instincts were screaming. Elena's instincts had been right to scream. The morning after her confrontation with Marcus, she arrived at the institute to find her key card access revoked from the advanced research lab. "Technical glitch," the security guard explained with an apologetic shrug. "Dr. Hartwell's office said they'd sort it out." But Marcus was in meetings all day, meetings Elena somehow wasn't invited to anymore. She found herself relegated to the general workspace, watching through glass walls as her research team, her former research team, discussed protocols she'd developed. Marcus gestured animatedly at the whiteboard where her intervention framework was sketched out, now labeled as Hartwell Method Preliminary Development. "Elena?" Dr. Walsh appeared at her desk, expression carefully neutral. "Could we chat privately?" In Walsh's office, the older woman closed the door with unusual deliberation. "I want you to know this comes from a place of concern. Marcus spoke with me about some observations he's made regarding your adjustment here." Elena's instincts had been right to scream. The morning after her confrontation with Marcus, she arrived at the institute to find her keycard access revoked from the advanced research lab. "Technical glitch," the security guard explained with an apologetic shrug. "Dr. Hartwell's office said they'd sort it out." But Marcus was in meetings all day, meetings Elena somehow wasn't invited to anymore. She found herself relegated to the general workspace, watching through glass walls as her research team, her former research team, discussed protocols she'd developed. Marcus gestured animatedly at the whiteboard where her intervention framework was sketched out, now labeled as Hartwell Method Preliminary Development. "Elena?" Dr. Walsh appeared at her desk, expression carefully neutral. "Could we chat privately?" In Walsh's office, the older woman closed the door with unusual deliberation. "I want you to know this comes from a place of concern. Marcus spoke with me about some observations he's made regarding your adjustment here." Elena's chest tightened. "What kind of observations?" "He's worried about your emotional stability, the intensity we discussed, your reaction to feedback, some concerning behaviors he's noticed." Walsh's voice carried professional distance now. The warmth from their first meeting was replaced by clinical assessment. Has the transition been difficult for you? Sometimes new positions can trigger underlying issues. Underlying issues? The phrase felt like a slap. Trauma researchers often carry personal wounds. It's not uncommon for the work to become overwhelming. Walsh leaned forward. Have you considered speaking with someone? Employee assistance offers confidential counseling. Elena stared at her, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. Marcus wasn't just stealing her work, he was systematically destroying her credibility. My work performance has been exemplary. Of course, no one's questioning your abilities, but emotional wellness affects everything. Walsh's smile was kind but firm. Marcus suggested perhaps a lighter caseload while you adjust. More supervision, less independent responsibility. Marcus suggested? Elena repeated the words, tasting their poison. By lunch, the whisper campaign had begun its work. Conversations stopped when Elena entered rooms. Colleagues who'd been warm during orientation now offered polite nods before finding urgent reasons to be elsewhere. She caught fragments. Adjustment difficulties, personal issues. Marcus is being so patient with her. Sarah found Elena eating alone in the courtyard, picking at a sandwich she couldn't taste. This is what I was trying to warn you about, Sarah said quietly, sitting down despite the risk. He did the same thing to Jessica Torres 3 years ago. Jessica Torres? Brilliant researcher, promising career. Made the mistake of questioning one of Marcus's publications, found an error in methodology. Suddenly, she was having episodes, becoming unstable, needed intervention. Sarah's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. She left before it got worse. Now she works at a community clinic in Vermont. Elena felt something cold settle in her stomach. How many others? Enough, but they all left before... Sarah glanced around nervously. Elena, he's already talking to Dr. Kingston about your situation, about how dedicated he is to helping struggling researchers. The meeting with Dr. Kingston that afternoon felt like a tribunal. The institute director sat behind his massive desk, Marcus beside him, wearing an expression of concerned mentorship. Elena, I understand you've been having some difficulties adjusting. Dr. Hartwell has brought some concerns to my attention. What concerns? Marcus leaned forward. Elena, no one's judging you. Transitional periods can be challenging, especially when personal trauma intersects with professional work. My personal trauma? Elena's voice sharpened. Your dissertation acknowledged childhood experiences that informed your research focus. Sometimes that personal investment can become problematic when professional objectivity is required. Kingston nodded. Dr. Hartwell has shown remarkable dedication to supporting you through this adjustment. Perhaps a modified schedule, additional oversight. I don't need oversight. Elena's words came out harder than intended. The two men exchanged glances. Marcus's expression grew more concerned. Elena, Kingston's voice carried paternal disappointment. This kind of reaction, the defensiveness, the paranoid ideation about work ownership, this is exactly what Dr. Hartwell was describing. Elena stared at them, realizing she was trapped in a perfect psychological maze. Any defense of her work would be labeled instability. Any anger at the theft would be evidence of emotional problems. Any fight would prove their point. I see, she said finally. Marcus smiled. I'm glad you're open to support. That's the first step towards healthy adjustment. Walking back to her desk, Elena felt the weight of every gaze in the office. She was no longer Dr. Elena Vasquez, promising researcher. She was the unstable new hire, the problem Marcus was generously trying to fix. But as she sat down and opened her laptop, Elena made a decision that would change everything. If Marcus wanted to wage psychological warfare, she would give him exactly what he taught her to expect. She opened a new document and began to type, Documentation Log, Day 12 at Whitmore Institute. The campaign against her had begun, but Elena Vasquez had spent her entire life learning to survive predators. And she was a very fast learner. Elena's war began with a single Google search at 2 a.m., Jessica Torres, psychologist, Vermont. The community clinic's website showed a smiling woman who looked haunted around the eyes, the same expression Elena saw in her own mirror lately. She called the next morning, hands trembling as she dialed. "This is going to sound strange," Elena began, when Jessica answered. "But I think Marcus Hartwell is doing to me what he did to you." The silence stretched so long, Elena wondered if Jessica had hung up. Then, "You're at Whitmore?" "Yes." "How long?" "3 weeks." Another pause. "It took him 6 months with me. He's getting more efficient." Jessica's voice carried the weight of old wounds. "We can't talk about this over the phone." They met at a diner an hour outside the city, Jessica's choice, somewhere neutral, somewhere safe. The woman who slid into the booth across from Elena looked older than her 32 years, success and confidence stripped away by institutional trauma. "He told everyone I was having a breakdown. Unstable, emotionally compromised. Sound familiar?" Elena nodded, her throat tight. "The gaslighting starts subtle, questioning your methods, your emotional investment. Then it escalates, excluding you from meetings, editing your work, spreading concerns about your mental state." Jessica's hands wrapped around her coffee cup like a lifeline. "Why didn't you fight back?" Jessica's laugh was bitter. With what? He controlled the narrative, had Kingston's ear. Everyone believed the troubled researcher story over accusations against the Golden Boy. She reached into her bag, pulling out a thick folder. "But I kept records. Everything. Emails, meeting notes, documentation of every theft, every manipulation." Elena stared at the folder. "You've been carrying this for 3 years? Hoping someone like you would eventually need it." Jessica's eyes met Elena's. Someone with the skills to use it properly. That evening, Elena spread Jessica's documentation across her apartment floor. Email chains showing Marcus gradually removing Jessica's name from research proposals, meeting minutes where her contributions were systematically erased. A pattern of psychological destruction laid out in devastating detail. Elena opened her laptop and began cross-referencing Jessica's experience with her own. The parallels were chilling. Marcus operated like a predator, following an established hunting pattern. She started a new document, Psychological Profile, Dr. Marcus Hartwell. Subject, exhibits classic narcissistic manipulation tactics. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Can we meet? Have something to show you, but be careful. He's watching everyone now." Elena smiled grimly as she typed back. Marcus had taught her well about institutional warfare. Now it was time to turn those lessons against their teacher. Elena's smile faded when she saw Sarah's evidence. They met in Sarah's car in the parking garage, windows fogged with nervous breathing, as Sarah pulled out her phone. "I recorded this yesterday," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with fear. Marcus was talking to Dr. Reynolds about the new graduate student, Alex Morgan. Elena listened to Marcus's smooth voice through the phone speaker. "Promising, but I'm concerned about his theoretical foundation. Reminds me of the issues we saw with Elena, that emotional intensity that can compromise objectivity. Perhaps he needs more direct guidance before he develops problematic patterns." The recording continued, Marcus systematically undermining Alex's work the same way he'd done to Elena and Jessica. The pattern was unmistakable, predatory, calculated. "He's already started," Sarah said. "Alex doesn't even know what's happening yet." Elena stared at the phone, watching the playback timer. Another victim, another brilliant mind about to be psychologically destroyed. How long before Marcus moves from undermining to character assassination? "With you, it took 2 weeks. He's getting faster." Sarah's hands gripped the steering wheel. "Elena, I can't be the only one standing against this. I have kids, a mortgage. If he targets me..." Elena understood. Sarah was offering intelligence, but couldn't risk open warfare. That left Elena to fight alone, or to become what Marcus was. That evening, Elena sat across from David Reeves in his cluttered office. Her former professor and current therapist looked older than she remembered, his kind eyes creased with concern as she explained the situation. "Elena, what you're describing is clearly institutional abuse. But what exactly are you planning to do about it?" Elena had been dreading this question. Use his methods against him, document his patterns, expose his vulnerabilities, turn his psychological weapons around. David leaned back in his chair. "You're talking about manipulation.
about becoming the thing you're fighting. Traditional channels failed. Kingston won't listen. HR protects the institution, not individuals. Marcus has spent years perfecting his system. Elena's voice hardened. Sometimes you have to fight monsters with monstrous methods. Do you hear yourself? David's voice carried the authority of decades in practice. You're rationalizing the corruption of your own ethics. This isn't justice, Elena. It's revenge. What would you have me do? Let him destroy Alex like he destroyed Jessica? Stand by while he builds his career on the bones of brilliant researchers? I would have you be better than him.
Elena stood abruptly. Better doesn't win. Better gets destroyed by people like Marcus. I've spent my whole life being better, David, being the good girl, the hard worker, the ethical researcher. And where has it gotten me? David studied her face. Elena, you're describing trauma response, the hypervigilance, the need for control, the justification of extreme measures. Don't psychoanalyze me, Elena's voice cracked. This isn't trauma response. This is survival. But even as she said it, Elena knew David was right. She was becoming someone else, someone harder and colder, someone willing to use psychological warfare as a tool of justice. Walking to her car, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dr. Vasquez, this is Alex Morgan. I was wondering if we could talk. Dr. Hartwell mentioned you might have some insights about adjusting to life at Whitmore. Elena stared at the message, seeing Marcus's invisible hand guiding the young researcher toward her, painting her as the unstable colleague who might need monitoring, might influence Alex negatively. Another move in Marcus's chess game. She could warn Alex, explain the danger he was walking into, take the moral high road David wanted her to take. Or she could use Alex as bait, document Marcus's psychological predation in real time, gather evidence that would destroy Marcus's career as thoroughly as he'd destroyed others. Elena typed her response. Of course, Alex. Let's meet tomorrow. I have quite a lot to share about life at Whitmore. As she sent the message, Elena felt something cold and calculating settle in her chest. Marcus had taught her that survival required adaptation, required becoming the predator instead of the prey. The student was about to become the master, and God help anyone who stood in her way. Elena's transformation began with Alex Morgan's coffee order, a simple vanilla latte that became her first weapon. She'd studied Marcus's patterns obsessively, understanding his need to control narratives, his compulsion to be the center of every important conversation. Marcus suggested I speak with you about adjusting to Whitmore, Alex said, settling into the cafe chair across from Elena. Young, eager, brilliant, everything Marcus preferred in his victims. Did he? Elena smiled, activating the recording app on her phone. How thoughtful. Tell me, has he mentioned any concerns about your work? Alex's face clouded slightly. He said my theoretical framework might be too rigid, that I should be more open to collaborative input. Elena nodded sympathetically while mentally cataloging the familiar phrases. Alex, can I share something with you, completely confidentially? Over the next hour, Elena carefully laid groundwork. Not enough to seem unstable, but sufficient to plant seeds of doubt about Marcus's motives. She documented Alex's responses, his growing confusion about Marcus's feedback, his admission that he'd felt undermined during recent meetings. Just be careful, Elena concluded. Sometimes mentorship can become complicated. Phase 2 began that afternoon. Elena knew Marcus would be in the faculty meeting, so she visited Dr. Reynolds in his office carrying a folder of research she had carefully selected. I wanted to discuss the Morgan project. I'm concerned about some methodological issues Marcus raised. Reynolds, hungry for gossip and unaware of Elena's agenda, leaned forward eagerly. Marcus mentioned emotional instability in Alex's approach, Elena continued, her tone professionally concerned.
But when I reviewed Alex's work independently, his methodology seemed quite sound, almost like Marcus was... She paused deliberately. Well, perhaps I'm misreading the situation. Misreading what? Reynolds pressed. Elena sighed, playing reluctant whistleblower perfectly. It's probably nothing, but some of Alex's innovations, they're remarkably similar to ideas Marcus presented last month as his own. The timeline seemed unusual. She left Reynolds with carefully planted doubts and moved to her next target. By day's end, Elena had seeded 3 separate conversations with subtle questions about Marcus's research attribution, his pattern of concerns about younger researchers, his tendency to take credit for collaborative work. Each conversation was recorded, each doubt carefully documented. That evening, Elena called the University of Pittsburgh, Jessica's former institution, and spoke with Dr. Martinez, a researcher who'd worked with Jessica before her Whitmore experience. Jessica Torres? Brilliant researcher. Such a shame what happened to her career. She had this innovative trauma framework, groundbreaking stuff. Then she just left academia suddenly. Mental health issues, I heard? Interesting. I've seen some similar theoretical approaches in Dr. Hartwell's recent publications. The framework sounds familiar. A pause. You know, now that you mention it, Marcus did visit our department several times while Jessica was here. They collaborated on a few projects. Elena smiled in the darkness of her apartment. The pattern was emerging. Not just psychological destruction, but intellectual theft spanning years, spanning institutions. Marcus had built his career on the broken dreams of brilliant researchers. But Elena was no longer just another victim. She was a hunter now, and she'd found the scent of blood in the water. Elena found Marcus waiting in her office at 7 a.m., sitting behind her desk like he owned it. His usual charm had been replaced by something harder, more dangerous. He had to talk, he said.
Elena remained in the doorway, every instinct screaming danger. About what? About the conversations you've been having, the questions you've been asking. Marcus stood slowly, his movements deliberate. I've been very patient with your adjustment difficulties, Elena, but spreading malicious rumors about colleagues crosses a line. I haven't spread any rumors. Marcus's smile was razor thin. Haven't you? Dr. Reynolds mentioned some interesting concerns you shared about research attribution. Dr. Martinez from Pittsburgh had some fascinating questions about publication timelines. His eyes narrowed. Someone's been very busy conducting their own investigation. Elena felt ice in her veins. He knew. Somehow, Marcus had connected the dots, traced her careful campaign back to its source. But she'd learned from watching him, never show fear, never admit guilt. I'm not sure what you're implying. I'm implying that your mental state has deteriorated to the point where you're having paranoid delusions about colleague misconduct. I'm implying that you've become a danger to yourself and potentially to others. Marcus stepped closer. I've scheduled an emergency psychological evaluation for you. Today, mandatory. Elena's blood turned to ice water. You can't force a psychological evaluation. Actually, I can. Institutional safety protocol allows for mandatory assessment when an employee exhibits concerning behavior that might compromise workplace safety or their own well-being. Marcus's expression turned almost sympathetic. Elena, you've been displaying classic signs of psychological breakdown: paranoid ideation, aggressive confrontation with authority figures, obsessive documentation of imagined slights. Imagined slights? Elena's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. There's that emotional volatility again. Marcus pulled out his phone, fingers hovering over the screen. I could call security right now. Have you escorted to the evaluation? But I'd prefer to handle this with dignity. Elena stared at him, realizing the trap was closing. If she agreed to the evaluation, she'd be labeled mentally unfit. If she refused, it would be used as evidence of her instability. Either way, Marcus won. You're terrified, she said suddenly, the insight hitting her like lightning. All of this, the evaluation threat, the escalation, you're desperate because you know I'm getting close to something. Marcus's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something feral underneath. Close to what, Elena? What exactly do you think you've discovered? The pattern, the theft, how many careers you've built on stolen research. Elena stepped into the office, no longer afraid. Jessica Torres was just the beginning, wasn't it? How far back does it go, Marcus? How many brilliant minds have you cannibalized? You're having a psychotic episode, Marcus said, but his voice had lost its authority. Am I? Or am I the first person who's fought back effectively enough to make you panic? You're used to victims who break, who run. But I'm not running, Marcus. I'm hunting. Marcus lunged toward her desk, yanking open drawers with violent desperation. Where is it? Where is your documentation? Not here. Elena watched him ransack her workspace, his composure completely shattered. He spun to face her, and for the first time, Elena saw Marcus Hartwell without his mask. The charm was gone, replaced by raw fury and something that looked like fear. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I've destroyed better researchers than you. I'll bury you so deep in psychological evaluations and competency hearings that no one will ever take your word seriously again. Maybe, Elena said calmly, but you'll have to catch me first. She turned and walked out of her office, leaving Marcus surrounded by the wreckage of her scattered papers. Behind her, she heard him making phone calls, his voice tight with panic. The war had begun in earnest, and for the first time, Marcus Hartwell was the one who looked afraid. Elena's hands shook as she dialed Amanda Price's number from the parking lot of a 24-hour diner 20 miles from Whitmore. After Marcus's threats, she had grabbed her laptop and evidence files and run. Now, sitting in her car with the engine running, she felt the weight of crossing a line she could never uncross. Amanda Price, Chronicle Herald. Miss Price, my name is Elena Vasquez. I have a story about systematic academic misconduct that I think you'd find interesting. A pause. Elena had researched Amanda thoroughly. 10 years exposing institutional corruption, 3 journalism awards, a reputation for thorough investigation and fearless reporting. What kind of misconduct? Research theft, psychological manipulation, career destruction. A pattern spanning multiple institutions and involving a senior researcher who's built his reputation by destroying others. Can you prove it? Elena looked at the box of evidence on her passenger seat. Extensively.
As of yesterday morning, I'm on involuntary psychological leave, pending evaluation. Elena's voice was steady, but Amanda's eyebrows rose. They're claiming you're mentally unfit? Standard retaliation tactic. Discredit the whistleblower. Elena opened her laptop. But I have 3 years of documentation from a previous victim, recorded conversations, email evidence, and testimony from multiple sources. For the next 4 hours, Elena walked Amanda through Marcus's systematic destruction of researchers' careers. Jessica's stolen framework, Alex Morgan's current targeting, the pattern of psychological warfare disguised as mentorship. Amanda listened with the focused intensity of a predator evaluating prey. This Dr. Hartwell, he's published extensively? 43 papers in the last 5 years, all using methodologies or theoretical frameworks originally developed by researchers who subsequently left their positions under mysterious circumstances. You've traced the pattern that specifically? Elena pulled up a spreadsheet. 7 institutions, 12 researchers, dating back 8 years. Every single one left academia after working with Marcus, citing mental health issues or career dissatisfaction. Every single one had innovative research that later appeared in Marcus's publications. Amanda studied the data, her expression growing sharper. This is extensive, professional-level investigation. I'm a trauma psychologist. I understand predatory behavior patterns. Elena met Amanda's gaze. But I need to ask you something. Some of my evidence-gathering methods were ethically questionable. I manipulated conversations, recorded without consent, used psychological techniques to extract information. Amanda leaned back in her chair. You're asking if I have a problem with that? I'm asking if it compromises the story. Elena, institutional predators rely on victims staying silent, staying ethical, playing by rules the predators ignore. Sometimes exposing monsters requires monstrous methods.
The question is whether your evidence is accurate and your motives are ultimately serving justice. My motives, I think of David's warnings about corruption. My motives started with justice. I'm not sure they've stayed there. That's honest, and it's exactly why this story needs to be told by someone outside the system. Amanda activated her recorder. Tell me about your psychological evaluation. What exactly did Marcus threaten? As Elena recounted Marcus's desperate escalation, she saw Amanda's journalist instincts sharpen. This wasn't just about academic misconduct. This was about institutional power being weaponized against vulnerable employees. Elena, I'm going to need to verify everything independently. Contact your sources, review documentation, probably spend weeks investigating before I can publish anything. Amanda's expression grew serious. But if even half of what you're telling me is true, this story will end more than just Marcus Hartwell's career. It'll expose systematic problems in academic institutions nationwide. Elena nodded, understanding the magnitude of what she'd set in motion. There's one more thing. Marcus isn't just a thief and manipulator. He's dangerous, desperate, and he still has considerable institutional power. Amanda's smile was sharp as a blade. Then we'd better work fast. Outside Amanda's office, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Not the naive optimism she'd brought to Whitmore, but the grim satisfaction of knowing the hunt was no longer hers alone. Marcus Hartwell was about to discover what happened when predators became prey.
The headline blazed across the Chronicle Herald. Academic Predator. How Dr. Marcus Hartwell built his career on stolen research and destroyed lives. Elena read Amanda's expose at 6 a.m., watching her war explode into national news. By 9 a.m., Marcus called her directly. "You destroyed everything," his voice cracked, the charm completely gone. 20 years of work, my reputation. "No, Marcus, you destroyed everything. I just documented it." The line went dead. Whitmore suspended Marcus by noon. Dr. Kingston held an emergency meeting, panic barely controlled as he managed the crisis. Elena watched remotely, still on psychological leave, as colleagues grappled with their golden boy's exposure as a predator. The ethics board summoned Elena that afternoon. "Your methods, recording without consent, psychological manipulation, raise serious concerns," Dr. Morrison said. "I used the same techniques trauma therapists use to help abuse victims. The difference is I exposed an abuser instead of treating his casualties." The board issued a formal censure while acknowledging her actions had exposed systematic abuse that traditional channels had failed to stop. That evening, Alex Morgan emailed, "You saved my career before it was destroyed. Thank you." Similar messages flooded in from Marcus's victims and potential victims. Elena had given voice to an entire community. But sitting in her apartment, surrounded by job offers, Elena felt hollow. She'd won, but at what cost to her soul? 6 months later, Elena sat in David Reeves' office, the weight of victory and moral compromise heavy between them. "The nightmares are getting better," she said, "but I still see his face when he called me, that desperation." "Regret?" David asked gently. "No, but I understand what you meant about becoming what I fought." Elena's hands rested calmly in her lap. "I saved careers, David, but I lost something of myself in the process." The professional community remained divided. Some called her a hero, others condemned her methods. Elena had declined the prestigious positions offered, choosing instead a role at a victim advocacy center. "Dr. Vasquez?" Her assistant knocked. "The new support group is here." Elena smiled, the first genuine smile David had seen from her in months. "Thank you." The group consisted of researchers who'd survived professional abuse. Jessica Torres had driven down from Vermont. Alex Morgan sat beside 2 graduate students from other universities. Sarah Chan had started attending, finally ready to process her own trauma from witnessing Marcus's campaigns. "Welcome," Elena said, looking at each face. "Let's talk about healing."
She learned that justice without compassion was just revenge, but justice tempered with healing, that might actually change things. For the first time since entering Whitmore's doors, Elena Vasquez felt truly at peace.